Okay. Do you have any questions from last time? Like last two classes, week 1? Any questions? You have watched the videos 1.1 to 1.4. You have attended 2 classes. Are you feeling comfortable with the material? Yes, the building blocks. You understand why an economy has to make choices. You understand opportunity cost, the true cost of something. You understand what is marginal analysis. Yes, you understand specialization. You understand the difference between equilibrium and efficiency. Does an efficient point mean that it is fair for all? It is equitable for everybody? No, right? So, efficiency does not mean equity, and the other way round. So, we are all clear about these points. Okay. Now, moving on to lecture note 2, and these are your videos on demand and supply, which you may have watched. If you have not watched all of them yet, you still have time. Please try and watch everything by Friday. Okay. This is about demand and supply. The single most important model in economics. Anything that we analyze in economics, mostly, I won't say anything, most things that we analyze in economics, be it micro or macro, is based on the analysis of demand and supply. And specifically for this course, if you pretty much understand this chapter, you will be good through the next, let us say, 3 chapters. Okay. So, this is very important. Now, what are we going to do here? We are first going to talk about demand, then we are going to talk about supply, then we will individually talk about the dynamics, that is the movements and the shifts of demand, then we are going to talk about the dynamics of supply, and then we are going to bring the two together and look at the dynamics of demand and supply together. Okay. That is exactly what we are going to do in this chapter. We will start today and hopefully we will be done by Thursday. So, starting with demand, okay. Now, quantity demanded, when we have a commodity and the buyers demand a certain quantity of that commodity, that depends on certain factors. Okay. The quantity demanded for a commodity depends on certain factors. Now, these factors can be broadly divided into 2 groups. So, let us say I am calling this quantity demanded and I am calling it QD, that is quantity demanded. So, the quantity demanded for any commodity depends on certain factors, and I can divide these factors into 2 categories, that is price. Okay. And when I say price, please remember, here I am talking about the price of the commodity in question, specifically the price of the commodity in question. So, if I am talking about ice cream, I am talking about the price of ice cream. If I am talking about peanut butter, it is the price of peanut butter. Okay. And very important for you to remember, because later we are going to talk about price of some other commodities also in the same context, but here we are just talking about price. So, to distinguish, we will say this is the own price of the commodity. That means it is the price of the commodity in question. And then you have some non-price factors. Okay. So, the quantity demanded for any commodity depends on its own price, and it depends on some other factors which are not essentially its own price, but something else, and we will see in a minute what are we talking about. Now, when we specifically talk about this relationship, that means the relationship between quantity demanded and any changes, increase or decrease in the own price of the commodity with everything else in the market staying same. Okay. Everything else in the market staying same. When I say everything else, what am I referring to? these non-price factors. Okay? So, rephrasing myself, if I look at the relationship between the quantity demanded of a commodity and any changes in its own price with other non-price factors in the market staying exactly the same, that is known as law of demand. That means, what am I trying to say? Law of demand has nothing to do with the non-price factors in the market. It has nothing to do with the non-price factors. Law of demand is only the relationship between quantity demanded of the commodity and its own price, changes in its own price, with everything else in the market staying the same. Okay? Now, what does the law of demand say? The law of demand is stated as, if the own price of the commodity rises, then the quantity demanded decreases, and if the own price of the commodity falls, then the quantity demanded increases. That means there is an inverse relationship. There is an inverse relationship between quantity demanded and the own price of the commodity, but most important part, with everything else, that is the non-price factors in the market, staying constant or unchanged. Now, that part, everything else staying constant or unchanged, in economics we also call that ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus basically means everything else staying the same or unchanged or constant. So, then can I summarize the law of demand by saying law of demand is the inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and own price of the commodity, ceteris paribus? Can I say that in one sentence? Is there anybody who has a question about that statement? It's an inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the own price of the commodity, ceteris paribus. That means everything else remaining unchanged. Good? Right? Now, the graphical representation of this law of demand is the demand curve. In this class, I will call it the D curve. The D curve is the demand curve, the capital D curve. So, the graphical representation of this inverse relationship is the demand curve. That means, when I am drawing a single demand curve, I am assuming that it is the relationship between the different quantities demanded for different prices, with everything else in the market staying the same. And if I draw another demand curve, then it will mean that the other factors, the non-price factors, have changed. That means, two different demand curves are depicting two different relationships, and between those two demand curves, the non-price factors could have changed. But as long as you are on the same demand curve, you have that inverse relationship, but you are assuming that the non-price factors are unchanged. Do you get that? Do you see the difference? If you have two different demand curves, you are looking at the inverse relationship for both specifically, but between those two, what has changed is the non-price factors. As long as you are on the same demand curve, it is ceteris paribus. So, other things are unchanged and you still have that inverse relationship. Okay? And things will become clearer to you as we move on during this class. But now, graphically representing this, once again we have the two-dimensional space. We have quantity and we have price always. Please do not flip that. It is not interchangeable. Quantity will always be on the x-axis, price will always be on the y-axis, and please remember, we are drawing this for one commodity at a time. Okay, so we are drawing it for one commodity. This is in that sense it is micro, means we are doing one commodity at a time. So, if the quantity, and by quantity I mean quantity demanded, okay. So, it is basically the QD that we are looking at here. So, if you start with a commodity, or if you start with a certain amount of the commodity, quantity demanded, whatever it may be, let me call that let us say Q1, and it could be any amount 10, 15, 20, any arbitrary number you can take, Q1 units, and for Q1 units let us say the price prevailing in the market is $P1. Once again it can be any number arbitrary. Okay. If there is a rise in the price to P2, then the quantity demanded must go down to Q2, must, always. Similarly, if there was a fall in the price to P3, then the quantity demanded must go up to Q3. That is exactly what we are saying. Intuitively, whatever I have said is represented there. If price goes up, quantity demanded has to go down. If price goes down, quantity demanded has to go up. So, I have plotted 3 points representing that inverse relationship, right. Now, if you draw a line through all those 3 points, then what you get is the demand curve, capital D, that is your D curve. Okay. Now, why does it have a negative slope? Why does this demand curve have a negative slope? Simply because of that inverse relationship. Simply because of that inverse relationship. Rise in one must have a decrease in the other, must be backed by a decrease in the other. That is why, and that is very intuitive. If you think about yourself, that is exactly what you do. If prices go up in the market, you do not want to buy as much. If prices go down, you want to buy more of the good, right. Now, the next thing is, let us say we start with a certain point. Let us say we start with a certain point, let us call that point A. Okay. Now, given that point, the price in the market, the price is P1, let us not bring in market yet, the price is P1, and at P1 the quantity demanded for that commodity is Q1. Okay. Now, if price goes up to P2, how do we know that quantity demanded comes down to Q2? We have drawn the curve, we just drew a line, but now what lies behind it? What is the mechanism, okay, that leads to the movement from Q1 to Q2? We are looking at the mechanism now. So, price has gone up from P1 to P2. As a result of that, there is a movement in the upward direction along the demand curve, so that the quantity demanded comes down to Q2. Okay. So far you only had the picture. Now, we are trying to give some logic, or we are trying to find a mechanism that how does this happen. Okay. There is a movement in the upward direction along the same demand curve, so that the quantity demanded decreases to Q2. Similarly, if the price went down to P3, then there would be a movement in the downward direction along the same demand curve, so that you have another point on the same demand curve C, corresponding to which your quantity demanded increases to Q3. That means each time when I say there is a movement in the upward direction or a movement in the downward direction along the same demand curve, the word to be highlighted there is the same demand curve. It is the same demand curve, means each time I am saying that it is just the relationship between these two with everything else staying the same. That is why it is the same demand curve. Nothing else in the market is changing. You just have a dynamic price, and as a result of a dynamic price, what happens to quantity demanded? Okay. Question? Okay. Now, the most important part, which kind of differentiates a layman from an economist. When we began the class, when some of you walked into the class, I was hearing people talking about stuff lecture notes and videos and stuff, and each one said, oh, law of demand, somebody was saying law of demand, when price goes up, demand decreases, when price goes down, demand increases. That's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because if price goes up, it is the quantity demanded that goes down. When I say change in demand, I refer to a change in the demand curve. Okay? So, it is not a change in demand, because you are still on the same demand curve. If you read lecture note 2, that is highlighted there, correct? So, law of demand, or whatever you have on the board right now, only tells you that if price rises, quantity demanded goes down without any change in demand. And if price goes down, quantity demanded goes up, once again without any change in demand. Do you see what I am saying? Right? So, that means whenever you have a movement, and please have this printed, you should not forget this. Whenever you have a movement, that movement has been driven by nothing else by own price. Nothing else can cause a movement except the own price of a good. Nothing else. And as long as it is a movement, it is referred to as change in quantity demanded. It is not a change in demand. It is a change in quantity demanded, which is not the same as change in demand. It does not imply a change in demand. Have we understood? Do we have any questions?
So what is the change in demand?
We will come to it in a minute. In 1 minute we will come to it, that is the next part. Okay. So, that means a movement in the demand curve in the upward direction is caused by an increase in price, as a result of which the quantity demanded goes down, and a movement along the demand curve in the downward direction is caused by a fall in the price, as a result of which the quantity demanded goes up, and in both cases there is no change in demand curve, which means we are on the same demand curve. Okay, good. Can we move on? Now, next part is, then what about these non-price factors? What about those non-price factors? What happens if there is a change in those non-price factors? But before that, we must know what non-price factors are we talking about. Now, this is for this class, okay, and this class alone. It is not there in any textbook, or it is not there in my lecture note. This is just for your class, to make things easy for you to remember, okay. So, if you go outside and somebody asks you what are the non-price factors for changing demand, please don't say okay, the non-price factors are tribe. It doesn't mean anything. I am just giving you this word to make it easy for you to remember. What do I mean by tribe? T stands for tastes. Whose taste are we talking about? Since we are on the demand side, who demands? The buyers or the consumers. So, we are talking about the taste of buyers. Okay. Next, we have R. R is refers to related goods. And what about related goods? We are talking about the price of the related goods, and we will elaborate on each one in a minute. Then I have I. I stands for income. Once again, whose income is it? We are dealing with demand side, so it is the buyer's income. Okay. Then I have B. B stands for buyers. What about the buyers? It is about the number of buyers that we are dealing with. Okay. And finally, we have E, that is expectation. Once again, whose expectation are we dealing with? Since we are on the demand side, it's the expectation of the buyers that we are talking about, consumers or buyers. Okay? So that means the non-price factors are the strive factors. So in this class, not on your exam, in this class I can say what happens if strive factors change. You will know that I am talking about the non-price factors, but this is just an acronym that we are using in the class for you to remember. Okay? Now let us go one step ahead and see what are we talking about. So now we are done with this part of the relationship. So next part of the relationship is we are looking at the change in quantity demanded due to any change in these strive factors, and while we do that we are going to assume that there is no change in anything else in the market. So what is left in the market? It's the own price, right? So when we are looking at the relationship between change in the non-price factors with the quantity demanded of the commodity, we assume everything else in the market remains constant. And what is that everything else? It's the own price, right? Do you follow what I am saying? Just the same thing. Now we are assuming that price remains unchanged, whereas there is a change in one of those non-price factors, correct? Now what we get as a result of this is a new demand curve. It's no longer the same demand curve. It's a new demand curve, or in other words, there is a shift in demand. Please note, now I am writing it's a shift in demand rather than quantity demanded. That means what am I referring to? I am referring to a new demand curve altogether, and that new demand curve could be located on either side of the old demand curve, and we will see in a minute how. It could be to the right or the left of the old demand curve. We will see when it is on the right and when it is on the left. Okay? Did everyone follow? So that means when we are looking at this part of the relationship with strive factors remaining unchanged, we are talking about a movement, or we are talking about law of demand, and hence we are talking about a change in quantity demanded. Whereas when we are looking at the relationship between QD and tribe, we are assuming own price to be unchanged, and hence we are talking about a new demand curve altogether, and hence a change in demand. Is that clear? Everybody follows? Okay, fine. Now let us elaborate a little bit here and see what are we talking about. Taste of the buyers. Okay, so let us say now I have let's get this off. Okay, let's say I have a market for chocolates. Okay, it could be anything. I am just taking this example. Market for chocolates. You have a demand curve, initial demand curve to start with. Let's call that D. You have a certain price for chocolates. Let's call that P1. When you have that price, the quantity demanded at that price is Q1. Okay. Now, suddenly there is an awareness campaign being run on newspapers, where doctors are advertising, physicians are advertising that eating chocolates is going to cause cardiological diseases. Okay. You are going to have heart diseases by eating chocolates, and they are publishing a lot of research, a lot of materials on that in the leading newspapers, on TV. Okay. What will happen as a result of that? People, the taste or the preference of most consumers will change. People will see those campaigns, and in their psyche now they do not want to have chocolates. Many people, many consumers will think that way, because now they are being told that if you eat chocolates, it is injurious to your health, it is going to harm you, right. Has anything happened to the price of chocolates yet? Has anything happened? Nothing has happened to the price of chocolates in step 1. So far nothing has happened. So, given the same price of chocolates, when I put that bar, it means constant price. I am holding that constant. Putting a bar above everything means it is unchanged. Okay? So, holding that price as constant just due to the change in the preference and the taste of the people, now at every single price, people will now start demanding less chocolates, so that now you have a new demand curve D dash. Please note that D and D dash are two different demand curves. They are not the same demand curve. When I say they are two different demand curves, I am trying to say that there must have been some change in one of those factors to have caused that. And please note that the new demand curve D dash lies to the left of the old demand curve D, because there has been a decrease in the demand. Had there been an increase in the demand, if somebody would have said, if it was advertised that chocolate is great, it is great for skin and hair, and you are going to avoid heart diseases by eating chocolates, then the taste would have changed in a positive way. More and more people would have started eating chocolates, and initially without any change in the price of chocolates, people would have started preferring chocolates, and in that case the demand curve, instead of moving towards the left, the demand curve would have moved towards the right to something like D double dash. Okay. But please note, what is important here is that the price would have remained constant initially, right, and whether the demand curve moves to the left or to the right, that would have determined whether the quantity would have gone down or the quantity would have gone up. Do you see that? And do you understand the difference between the movement and the shift? Can you just compare between those two diagrams? In both cases, your quantity demanded has gone up or down, but the mechanism is different. There it was a movement which was driven by a change in this axis. Here it is a shift with no change in this axis, but something else which you are not able to see in the diagram, because we do not have a third axis. It is not a 3-dimensional diagram, so we cannot plot what has changed. Do you see what I am saying? Is everyone clear? So, can we summarize, can we just take away 2 points from here and say, based on this, that whenever something changes such that there is an increase in demand, demand goes up, then that causes a right shift of the demand curve, right shift of D curve, as a result of which the quantity will increase at the same price, constant price. Similarly, if there was something that caused a decrease in demand, then that would cause a left shift of the D curve such that there would be a decrease in the quantity. Is everyone good with that? And this increase or decrease in the demand, can it be caused by own price? Can this be caused by own price? No. It will always have to be caused by one of those tribe factors, always. And no matter which factor changes, this will always be true. For an increase in demand, you would have a right shift. For a decrease in demand, you would always have a left shift, irrespective of which factor changes. Okay? Let us go through another factor, related goods, very important factor. Let us see. So, let this box be there, because that will be true for anything. Now, let us say, now what are related goods? When I say related goods, what am I talking about? For related goods, there are two kinds of related goods. Related goods could be Can you all see if I write here? Not really? Okay, let's put it here. Related goods are two kinds. One, substitutes, and the other, complements. Okay. Substitutes, what are substitutes? As the name suggests, alternatives to each other, that's a substitute. Okay. Pen and pencil, substitutes for writing, correct? Whiteboard or blackboard, substitutes for displaying in the classroom. Brands, Pepsi and Coke, substitutes, both are cola beverages. Tea or coffee, both hot beverages, right? So, alternatives to each other, those are substitutes, but they are related, right? You always have to choose A versus B, and then a consumer may have a preference for either, but for many consumers they will be indifferent between the two. So, for most consumers it is a choice. When you consider these goods, it is a choice between A or B, but there may be some consumers. That is why economics is interesting, because you can always have pathological cases, okay? You can always have exceptional cases. Here we are not dealing with those pathological or exceptional cases. I may be a person who has a strict preference for coffee. I do not drink tea at all. Okay. So, in that case tea and coffee are not substitutes for me. In that case coffee, flavors of coffee may be a substitute, Colombian coffee versus Brazilian coffee or something like that. Okay. So, that is possible, but here we are just talking about usual normal cases. For most people it is a choice between two hot beverages. Now, the next part is complements. Now, how do we know what are complements? Complements are goods that always go hand in hand, they go together. Okay. Now, this is very important for you to understand. Often when we will go on the supply side, we will talk about one factor, and I just want to mention that factor because often you get confused about that. On the supply side, we have a factor which is called input or ingredient, and often you will be confused between complements and ingredients. Why? Because ingredients are on the supply side. So, you have to think from supply side when you think about ingredients. When you think about complements, you will have to think from the demand side. So, unless you understand the difference between complements and ingredients or inputs, you will not be able to get the answer right, because you will be kind of confused that which side have I got to deal with. Now, the simple trick for you to remember is that complement is one which is consumed together, peanut butter and jelly, okay, wine and cheese, those kind of things, but one is not going into the other. You are not using cheese to make wine, you are not using jelly to make peanut butter. Do you see what I am saying? Hammer and a plank of wood, if you are using them together, it is a complement. You are not using the plank of wood to make the hammer or the other way around, but for ingredient it is used in making the other good. Sugar and soft drink, soda, sugar is going into soda to make it, right. When you drink soda, a bottle of soda, you do not eat a fistful of sugar with that. So, they are not complements. Do you see what I am saying, the difference? But it is very important, because this will kind of help you to distinguish between whether you are going to think from the demand side of things or are you going to think from the supply side of things. When we discuss questions next week on demand and supply, you will see how this makes a difference, how understanding which factor we are dealing with will kind of set the first step for you. If you get that, then you will get the question right. Okay? So, it is very important. Okay. Now, coming back, substitutes and complements. Now, let us say we have two substitutes. We have Pepsi and we have Coke. So, for most peoples they are substitute for most people. Okay. Now, I have an initial demand curve for Pepsi and I have an initial demand curve for Coke. Now, I have not decided whether I am going to give you any subjective questions on the exam, but please remember, if you do have any subjective questions, labeling those axes will be very important. If you do not label the axis properly and the curves properly, you lose points. Okay? Now, let me say the question, the commodity in the question is Pepsi. So, this is my primary commodity in the question, Pepsi, and Coke is a substitute. Coke is the related good. Okay? Now, let us say there is an increase in the price of Coke. So, you have a movement along the demand curve in the Coke side, correct, because it is a change in the price of Coke, change in its own price. So, you have a movement, all of you agree to that, it is not a shift, as a result of which the quantity demanded for Coke will go down. So, less people start drinking Coke. As a result of that, what will happen on the Pepsi side? On the Pepsi side, without any change in the price of Pepsi initially, there will be a change in demand for Pepsi. There will be an increase in the demand for Pepsi, because now the people, some people who were earlier drinking Coke when it was cheaper, will now shift their preference towards drinking Pepsi, and hence the demand for Pepsi will rise. Please note, nothing has happened to the price of Pepsi initially. Own price of Pepsi is held constant, because we are dealing with the Pepsi market, right? Pepsi is our commodity in question. So, as far as Pepsi is concerned, what has changed? The price of a related good. So, tribe has changed for Pepsi, R has changed, its own price is constant. But if you just single out the Coke market, then it is a change in the own price of Coke, it is a movement there. Do you see the difference between the two? In the Coke market, it is a movement, it is a change in quantity demanded, but in the Pepsi market, it is a change in demand, correct? All of you agree? Now, in the same question, instead of a rise in the price of Coke, had there been a fall in the price of Coke? Had there been a fall to P3, then again there would be a movement in the downward direction this time, as a result of which more people would now start drinking Coke, the quantity demanded for Coke would increase. So, how will the quantity demanded increase? The quantity demanded increases because some people from the Pepsi drinking market would have moved to Coke, right, as a result of which, without any change in the initial price of Pepsi, the demand for Pepsi would have gone down and you would have a new demand curve D double dash. Is it clear? So, can I summarize and say that an increase in the price of the substitute, now see why I was writing own price, because now we are dealing with price of related goods, right. So, if there is an increase in the price of the related good, that leads to an increase in the demand for the good in question, that is a right shift. Something like D to D dash, D to D dash, right. And if there is a decrease in the price of the substitute, then that causes a decrease in the demand for the good in question, that is for Pepsi, that is a left shift, and that is represented by D to D double dash, the green one. Please note, those curves D, D dash, D double dash are all independent curves. They are all independent curves, they are different demand curves. Okay? Is that clear? Take a minute. So, now if I had to study for the exam, how would I study for this? First, I would remember this box, that if demand increases, it is a right shift, if demand decreases, it is a left shift. Demand will increase or decrease because of change in one of those tribe factors. It's not own price. First, this is what I would remember. Next, when I have to remember about substitutes, I would remember that it's always in the same direction. Can you see that? It's always in the same direction. Increase for an increase, decrease for a decrease. Increase in the price of substitute means demand is up, right shift. Decrease in the price of substitute means demand down, left shift. Easy so far? If you have all objective questions, then you don't have to remember so much in terms of diagrams. You have to kind of remember those snippets. Good. Now let's move on to complements. Now once again I am giving you the example of normal people. I mean, I shouldn't say normal, but usual people. Okay, we are not dealing with exceptional cases. Let us still deal with Pepsi. Let's bring in a complement for Pepsi, a complement good for Pepsi. Let's say pizza. So I eat pizza and I drink Pepsi with that. Okay, Pepsi does not go into making pizza, so it's not an ingredient, but they go hand in hand for many people. When you order pizza, you order some kind of soda with it. So let's say that is Pepsi. So once again, the market that I am worried about, the good that I have in my question is Pepsi, and pizza is the related good. But now the relationship between the two is they go hand in hand, they are consumed with each other. So they are complement goods, right? So now if there is an increase in the price of pizza, then obviously there will be a movement in the upward direction, as a result of which the quantity demanded will go down. By now we know that. But what will happen as a result? If people do not buy pizza, then some people who were drinking Pepsi along with pizza, they will also not demand Pepsi. And without any change in the price of Pepsi, holding the price of Pepsi constant, there would be a left shift in the demand for Pepsi from D to D double dash. Will you agree? Correct? So now can I say that if the price of the complement increases, then you have the opposite. Then you have a decrease in the demand for the good in the question, which is a left shift, something like D to D double dash. Okay. Similarly, if there was a decrease in the price, then there would be a movement in that direction. So quantity demanded in the pizza market would increase through that movement. Now more people want pizza. As they want more of pizza, they also want more of Pepsi to go along with that. So without any change in the price of Pepsi, now demand for Pepsi will also increase, correct? So now if that goes down, then the other would go up. So that's a right shift. That's something like D to D dash. Once again, I will remember that for complements, it's a inverse relationship. If the price of the complement goes up, demand must go down. If the price of the complement goes down, demand must go up. Whereas for substitute, it was in the same direction. Good? Any questions you have so far? Take a minute, look at what you have written. Otherwise, we can move on to income, which is the next one. Okay.
Can you just explain the complement when it goes down, demand goes up, just the right shift one more time? I guess I'm not.
Okay. So if the price of pizza goes down, right, you have a movement in the downward direction. because nothing else has changed in the pizza market except its own price. So you have a movement, not a shift, as a result of which we have an increase in the quantity demanded. Now that means more people now crave for more pizza. As they want more pizza, they want something else that goes with pizza, which is Pepsi, right? So more people will want Pepsi, but here it's not a movement, but it's a shift in the preference of the people to have more pizza, more Pepsi, which means that the price of Pepsi initially is constant, and at every price there is an increase. So that's a right shift. Okay. Moving on. The next one is about income. Okay, now what happens with income? Let's start with an example. So let's say I come from India to USA in fall 2009. Okay, no income whatsoever, zero income in USA because graduate school is not paying for stipend before September. Okay, so the first paycheck will come in September and I have landed in July. In August there is no car. Why? Because there is zero income. Now in September, first paycheck comes, October, second paycheck comes. From the next month, after paying for books and stuff, you start saving something. So by December, you have some positive savings and you get the first car. Okay, whatever, old car, new car, whatever, the first car. Then studying for 5 years, you have just that one car. Then you have a job. Suddenly there is a jump in income by more than 100%. Okay, from PhD stipend to a faculty job. Now I think that okay, I should have not just one car, I will just keep the old car for driving within the city, whereas for highway driving and when I want to go to a fancy party, I need another car. So I will buy another car. So now I have two new cars or two cars, let's say. Okay, and then let's say in 10 years my income jumps by some another 100%, let's say, and by then I have a kid. Okay, now I think that okay, in 10 years my income has gone up and I need another car, so I will buy another car. So what am I doing? Every time income gets added, you are demanding more of the same commodity, isn't it? And that will be true for most of us. If you cannot afford, you will do with 2 pairs of jeans and 2 shirts. If you have more income, you need a black jeans, you need a blue jeans, you need a faded one, you need so on and so forth, right? That happens to all of us. That means, can we safely say that whenever there is a rise in income, there is an increase in demand or there is a right shift and nothing has happened to the price of the good? Please note, without any change in the price of the good, even when the price of cars have not changed, just because I earn more and I feel richer, I have a preference of demanding more. Similarly, if I was earning less, then, okay, let me put it here. If I was earning less, then I would demand less and that would be a left shift once again, and I am not drawing the diagrams here, but just like the previous one, it would be a left shift, because without any change in the price of the good in question, in my example cars, I just feel like buying less because I don't have money. Now this relationship will be true provided we are dealing with a good which is a normal good. And most goods that we see around ourselves are normal goods. So now we are kind of distinguishing between goods. When the good is normal, then for a normal good this relationship will hold. For a rise in income, it's a rise in demand. For a fall in income, it's a fall in demand. Now let's say the good is inferior instead of being normal. It's an inferior good. Classic example of inferior good in economics, microeconomics is ramen noodles. You're a poor graduate student, you're living on a stipend, you eat ramen noodles for dinner almost every day. Okay. When the income rises, there is no change in the price of ramen noodles, but you don't want more of ramen noodles because you consider that to be inferior. So now you want better food. So your demand for ramen noodle goes down. Although your income has gone up, you don't crave for ramen noodles. Do you see what I'm saying? Another example would be thrift store clothes. You don't have income, you have to buy clothes from thrift store. Your income increases, although there is no change in the price of those clothes from the thrift store, you would not go and buy there because you consider that to be inferior. Do you see? Used cars. For some people, they would consider that to be inferior. If your income rises, you do not go and start buying used cars just because you have more income. Your demand probably goes down because you consider that to be inferior. Is that good? So that means for inferior goods, we have the relationship in the opposite direction. That is, when your income goes up, your demand goes down, and if your income goes down, then you demand more of that. Now from your field, from your healthcare field, can you think about any example like that? What will be an example of a normal good from the healthcare field? Your income rises, you want more. If your income falls, you want less.
Could you use branded drugs versus generic drugs?
Very good, very good. For some people, they may consider the generic drugs to be inferior. So if I am a high income earner, I don't start going and buying more of the generic drugs. I rather buy branded ones. So my demand for generic drugs will go down because I consider generic to be inferior. That happens. How about a normal good? An example? Can you give an example?
Elective surgeries that you have to pay for?
Not really. And you will see why. Write that down somewhere. We will discuss it in next week. Why that's not a good example. You remind me, okay? Because if your income rises, you don't really go and get yourself sliced up. Most people, right? Although your income has gone up. So those things are a little different case. We will talk about those. Insurance, right? Yeah, very good. So if your income rises, you want better coverage, right? You buy not just the basic insurance, you probably buy additional insurance for long-term care, disability, so on and so forth, right? Your income goes down, you probably just want the basic one. Some people would just go without insurance. Yes? Okay, so you got an essence of what we are trying to talk about here. Good. Moving on, the next one, number of buyers. Now the other two are pretty easy. Number of buyers, more people buying the good in the market. Without any change in the price of the good, there will be more demand in the market, correct? At the beginning of a semester, more students go to the bookstore to buy the textbook. Nothing has happened to the price of the textbook, but since there are more buyers, it's a higher demand. So it's a right shift. Similarly, mid-semester, people are not buying it. Not that the price has gone up or gone down, but now students have books, so there are less buyers, so less demand in the market. Okay, is that clear? Towards any, let's say Christmas, retail stores will have more people walking in, so there will be more demand for certain things, and there will be, when the festival season is over, you will probably have less demand. Now, during Christmas, is it possible for a movement? Is there possible for a movement along the demand curve during festival seasons? If yes, why? If no, why? Because there might be discounts. What are discounts? Discounts are fall in the price, fall in the own price of the commodity, right? It's not about the preference of the people. It's not about the number of buyers, but it is about the own price. If it's a discount, means the price of the commodity has been slashed. If the price of the commodity has been slashed, it is a movement downward along the same demand curve, so that the quantity demanded rises. Do you see how you can have the same effect, but due to two different factors and two different mechanisms? Yes? Clear? Okay. The next one, expectations about of the buyers. Now, this is a little, you have to remember two things here. When we are talking about expectations, yes.
I wrote down that two different demand curves represent changes in the non-price factors, but we're saying that changes in price is causing a shift.
No. Now, the next one is expectation of the buyers. Now, here we are forming, as consumers, we are forming expectations, but expectations about what? We are forming expectations about the own price, of the commodity, but we are forming, as soon as I say expectation, it means I am forming an opinion about the future own price of the commodity. So, I am not talking about the own price today, but I am talking about what I am expecting the own price to be in the future, and as a result of that, what happens to the demand today. What happens to D today? Okay. Let me give you an example. Let us say in the 15th of November, my laptop breaks down, okay, laptop crashes on 15th of November, and I do not have an emergency. I can wait for some time. I know around Thanksgiving there will be some sale, some discounts coming up on gadgets, on laptops. So, what I am expecting? On 15th of November, I am expecting the price of laptops to be slashed in the future, right? As a result of that, my demand today is going to be lower, because I am going to keep my demand on hold today. I am going to buy the good in the future. So, today my demand is down, because I expect the prices to be cheaper. So, I rather buy it when it is cheap rather than buying it today. Okay. Please see the difference. The own price today is still constant. Nothing has happened to the price of laptops today. That is why it is coming under tribe and not under the other one. It is not a movement, it is still a shift, because its own price, but it is the future own price, not the own price today. So, it is going to be a left shift today. And these will become clear if you take a look at the diagrams that I have posted, supplement diagrams that I have posted on your in your lecture notes folder, right? Shift of demand, shift of supply. I have given you some diagrams from a textbook. If you take a look at that, this will be really clear to you. Similarly, if I expect the own price to rise in the future, then I know today that it is going to become more expensive. So, I rather buy it today rather than holding the purchase till future. So, my demand today is going to be higher. I rather buy it today.
Unless it's a recurring charge.
Unless it's a?
Unless it's like when Netflix charged the price, it was going to increase their price. That's a reoccurring charge, so I guess you wouldn't have an increase in.
So, the demand today is going to be up. That's a right shift. Okay. Now, can you please take a look at whatever you have written for 2 minutes, and then we can sum up, and then we are going to do the supply part next time. So, now we are done with the buyer side of things from the consumer side. But now you know that whenever we are talking about a market, there are two groups, buyers and sellers, right? Now, we have the demand side worked out, but we cannot say anything about what happens in the market because we do not have the supply side worked out. So, next time we are going to look at the supply side of things, and remember all this because we are going to bring this together with the supply side and see what happens in the